Recently, the Switch 2 was revealed, as I'm sure you're all aware at this point. We didn't see much in the way of games, except, obviously, a new Mario Kart. It's been a while since we got a new Mario Kart game, as in over a decade now. I believe that when this game releases, it on Wii U will be older than Mario Kart Double Dash was when the original MK8 released. So to say people are excited is a massive understatement. And so, I sat here thinking, and I had an idea of how to farm views from people's excitement. So today, I'll be going over my prediction for what tracks will be brought back as retro tracks from Mario Kart on Switch 2. Before we get into that, if you enjoy this video, please consider liking and subscribing. People claim that this works, I guess. And also, we're so close to 500, and that number looks very cool, so please help. With that out of the way, let's get into making the retro track selection for Switch 2's Mario Kart. Before actually saying which tracks I think are going to be selected, I think it's important that I build a baseline method of thinking for how I'm going to craft this selection. Firstly, with how massive 8 Deluxe ended up being, ending the game with 96 tracks total, I don't think we're going to be able to go back down to 32 at launch again. So for both the sake of not making this game seem disappointing by comparison to what came before it, combined with the desire to milk this video's length by predicting more retro courses, I'm going to predict that this game will launch with 48 courses, so that'll give us 24 retro courses to predict, rather than the usual 16. Next, I think it's important that we consider representation in this assortment of retro courses. At first you may be thinking, well, of course representation is an important thing, but I think it goes deeper than just stuff like making sure all games are represented, for example. I consider not just representing all the games, but representing different themes of track, fan favorites that were considered snubs from the Booster Course Pass, tracks that haven't returned yet, popular tracks that have already returned, but are certainly worthy of being brought back again, etc. Speaking of Booster Course Pass, I think I'm safe to assume that any tracks that were a part of it, along with the retros and A on Wii U, are at least off the table for launch of this game, so I've cut all of them out. Because of that rule, I've cut out all the city tracks from Tour, so I basically cut out almost every Tour track in the selection. Oh yeah, and also, I'm not bringing back any tracks that have already been remade twice. So sorry, but a lot of fan favorites like Waluigi Pinball, Coconut Mall, Maple Treeway, etc. are out of the discussion for this roster. Small disclaimer, I'm not counting any retro tracks that appeared in Tour towards their number of remakes, as that would disqualify so many tracks as double dippers. Only appearances in the console or handheld games count against them. Another thing that I feel it's important to do is put a lot of emphasis on 8's new tracks when it comes to making this list, considering how many tracks that may have otherwise been candidates for these spots got their time with the BCP. Along with that, did you see how this game sold? So yeah, 8 is going to be among the most represented games here. But now that that's all sorted out, let's talk about what you guys are actually interested in. The list itself. We're going to go in chronological order for this list, so we're starting with the returning tracks from Super Mario Kart. I don't think that I'm breaking many people's hearts when I say that I only opted to bring back 2 tracks from the original for this list. Super is weird in that it has a bunch of different tracks that are just reiterations of the same thing. For example, having 4 different Mario circuits. Some of these theme tracks have seemingly gotten way more recognition than the others, and so I looked towards some of the lesser rehashed themes to fill out my selections for the original game. The 2 that immediately popped out to me were Koopa Beach and Vanilla Lake. Ghost Valley and Choco Island also fit this bill to an extent, but Ghost Valley lost out to some other spooky themed tracks that we'll go over when getting to later installments. And to be honest, Choco Island doesn't seem like it has the greatest potential to be a visually interesting track, even in an HD era, so I give the other themes the nod over it. With the older games at this point, I think it's important to give attention to the tracks that haven't returned yet, and so that cut out Koopa Beach 2. And I didn't want to bring back the first iterations of each track, so my picks for Super Mario Kart are Koopa Beach 1 and Vanilla Lake 2. They both account for certain themes, being a beach track and ice level respectively, and I think they both have strong potential to be reimagined with new gameplay mechanics, specifically underwater driving, in mind. Moving on to 64, and again, only 2 returning tracks from this one. 64 is kinda complicated, as the game I would say hasn't aged the best, to put it lightly. 64 kinda suffers from the opposite of Super Mario Kart's problems of the tracks being so short that they need 5 laps, while 64s are so long that the biggest challenge can be staying awake long enough to finish a race on them. While this opens up a lot of room for reimagining tracks to make them fit the modern era, we kinda got that with quite a few tracks in 8, as post Booster Course Pass, 6 out of the 16, or 37.5% of the tracks in 64 are present in 8, and if you just cut that list back to Mario Kart 7, then that number becomes 8 out of 16, or half. 12, or 75% going back to Wii, and 15 out of 16 if you consider the debut of retro tracks in DS. That's right, only 1 track from 64 is yet to be made into a retro track. Nintendo seems to really put an emphasis on bringing back tracks from this game, So screw it, let's make that number 100% by bringing back Wario Stadium. This track is where we thank the person who decided to make dividing certain tracks by section instead of lap a thing, as this would get the N64 Rainbow Road treatment, lest people want to subject themselves to 5+ minutes of N64 Wario Stadium. To be honest, I was actually fairly shocked this track didn't return to the BCP, as the introduction of sections to divide tracks instead of laps opened the door for this track to return without becoming a mind-numbingly boring or frustrating experience. Now for the other track. I want to bring back one of the N64 tracks remaining in DS, but again, Banshee Boardwalk lost out to other spooky tracks, and Chocolate Mountain's presence in the BCP made it both a double dipper for remakes, along with it just being too soon for launch Mario Kart in my eye. This leaves us with two options, Moo Moo Farm and Frappe Snowland. I just feel like Moo Moo Farm is a bit too unexciting to pick over Frappe Snowland. So let's say screw it, we double down on the snow tracks by picking it to be the second 64 track we bring back. Moving on to Super Circuit, and this is the first game that I've picked out 3 tracks to return. Again, as Super Circuit is an earlier game in the series, and had more flat track designs like in Super, I want to prioritize tracks that have yet to be remade with these selections. And like I said, some other contenders that may have gotten nods instead opened up the door for my picks here when they got into the BCP. For my first pick, I went with Yoshi Desert, as my selection was begging for a desert-themed track as the room for picks began to run out. As I also noticed when I made my picks, I saw lack of flora and trees in some of them. And a track that can utilize the underwater mechanic couldn't hurt as well, so my second track choice was Lakeside Park. Man, Nintendo or Intelligent Systems could have chosen a different name for it other than just changing the word river to lake and vice versa. But anyways, for my last Super Circuit selection, remember how tracks like Ghost Valley and Banshee Boardwalk got passed up for other spooky themed tracks? Well, this is the first of them, as I opted to pick Broken Pier. I had one other candidate for this third spot, being Rainbow Road, but it ended up losing out to one of the Rainbow Roads from a later game. Moving on to Double Dash's tracks, and it's actually surprising to me the fact that we have 4 tracks from this game that haven't even been brought back as tracks in Tour, according to Mario Wiki, so if that's misinformation, blame this website, not me for not properly researching. But yeah, with the 3 spots I allocated to this game, let's whittle down that number. I think there's a case for double dipping with Dino Dino Jungle here, but considering these 4 tracks don't even have the Tour distinction, and that some of these tracks have aspects to them that help them stand out from other tracks, I think it's fair to pick them over a track that's already come back as recently, games-wise, not years-wise, as 7. For my first pick, well, if we're throwing out all the city-themed tracks from Tour from consideration, I may as well have something city-themed, with my first pick being the aptly named Mushroom City. Well, we got Toad's Turnpike and Moonview Highway brought back in 8, so let's fill the gap left of the nighttime race on a road with traffic niche by bringing back Mushroom City. Nighttime tracks are also kind of way on this selection right now, so I can fill that sort of theme, I guess. Another track that I think is a solid choice to bring back, if for nothing else than its defining trait, is Wario Coliseum. I don't think it's the most fondly remembered track, heck, probably not even close when we're talking about just Double Dash, but if quality of a track was what determined which tracks came back, Waluigi Pinball wouldn't have come back twice. Hot take, I know. But yeah, Wario Coliseum is remembered for one key thing, being a 2-lap track, rather than the traditional 3 laps due to its own length, something that certain tracks in 64 could have used. If even just being 2 laps is still too much of an annoyance, then this can just be made into a 3-section track, though I do want Coliseum to keep its defining trait, if possible. This may be going a bit too heavy on the Wario track representation, but hey, he's cool, I don't see that as such a bad thing. And lastly, the final track comes down to either Bowser's Castle or Rainbow Road for me. I initially had Mushroom City out for both these making in, but I kinda don't feel like Nintendo will want to make the retro selection for Bowser's Castle and Rainbow Road be from the same game, so I decided that there can't be one with the other. When it comes to making a decision like this, the choice wasn't really between which track would be a better pick, but rather which track can be more easily left out and substitute for another track with that moniker. And yeah, the clear winner here is Bowser's Castle. We're kinda beginning to run low on Rainbow Roads that haven't come back. Super Circuits and DS's aren't necessarily bad, but I wouldn't say fans are clamoring for those ones to come back just yet. And 8's kinda falls under that same umbrella, while also being drawn up by some more beloved tracks from that game. So yeah, GameCube Rainbow Road gets the nod here. Moving on to DS, and this game is only having 2 tracks to represent it. Luckily though, one of those may be the easiest slam dunk pick. Though it has come back prior, Airship Fortress is a beloved track that was considered one of, if not the biggest snub from the BCP. I think nearly everyone thought this thing was a near shoo-in to come back at the beginning of the DLC, but hey, that opens up an opportunity for its re-return in the Switch 2's Mario Kart, so let's throw it in here. For the other pick, I don't think it hurt to have another spooky themed track, and Twisted Mansion is kind of forgettable. So sure, another DS track that was remade in 7 it is. Let's bring back Luigi's Mansion. Now going to Wii, with 4 tracks coming from it, and it's at this point where I think we can start to put less of an emphasis on representing different themes of track, and focus a bit more on bringing back well-known and fan-favorite tracks. Of course, just because we're putting less emphasis on it though, doesn't mean no emphasis is being put towards it, as we still don't have a circuit track yet, and considering the competition in that regard is Daisy Circuit, which just came back, and Mario Circuit, which I initially wanted to pick, but just couldn't find a good spot to put it in terms of the track order, I decided to pick Luigi Circuit for filling that hole. For another track that I see fans considering a snub from the BCP, I decided to also bring back Toad's Factory. For the third track, I feel like this is a good choice for returning Bowser's Castle. Lastly, though I'm not a fan of desert tracks personally, this was the part where I had to keep in mind that these are predictions rather than my wish list, and so I had to be fair and give decent representation to the desert tracks too. So let's bring back Dry Dry Ruins to join Yoshi Desert. We're now approaching the end as we move towards our 3 core selections from 7. My first pick for retros from 7 was Shy Guy Bazaar. It's a fairly unique setting for a track, and on top of that, it's a track that was in Tour, didn't come to the BCP, and seems to be fairly popular amongst fans. With these factors in mind, I feel like it's one of the strongest contenders for a Tour track that didn't make it into the Booster Course Pass. Following that, I had a bit of a hard time putting together enough tracks that I thought would be fair for the earlier Retro Cups, so I decided to bring back Daisy Hills to fill that role. Lastly for 7, I had Wario Shipyard as a contender initially, but remember, we already have 2 tracks with Wario's branding on them, so I decided to leave it out. Well, what about the Woohoo tracks? The first tracks will be based on a different IP, they have notable history when it comes to Mario Kart, and I feel like it'd be a good idea to represent one of them in this new game. And well, I'm noticing a lack of beautiful sunsets in this selection, so let's go with Maka Woohoo over Woohoo Loop. Lastly, let's move on to 8, which being the most recent game in the series, not counting Tour, and also the most popular, I feel it's fair to give it more of the spots here. So with 4 spots to fill, let's complete this roster of retro tracks. Starting off, the Star Cup in 8 is kinda stacked with tracks that stand out for one reason or another, so I made a hard rule for myself to limit to just one track from this cup. Otherwise, we may have very well just had the Star Cup fill out my retro selections from 8. But anyways, which of the tracks gets the nod? Dolphin Shoals of course has the amazing saxophone lick, but seems to be generally agreed upon as one of the weaker courses in the cup in terms of gameplay, from what I can gather. Additionally, Mount Wario was subbed out from my initial selection so I can make room for Dry Dry Ruins, and this brings us down to Electrodrome and Sunshine Airport. I know I'll make some people upset with this pick, but I feel like Nintendo would probably be more likely to bring back Sunshine Airport. Maybe in the Mario Kart on Switch 3, we can have a raid party again. But now, we have 3 more spots to fill. I think it'd be fair to bring back at least one of the tracks from 8 on Wii U's DLC, though I'm a bit hesitant on bringing back any of the other IP collab tracks. Though just to set the record straight, if I were to do so, the choice would 100% be Big Blue. I gave myself the choice between Wild Woods and Dragon Driftway, but I feel like Wild Woods is the more light track, and it gives us another track with more, woods. Though it's not personally my cup of tea, Cloud Top Cruise is a beloved track from 8, and so I feel like it would get a nod here. And last but not least, Toad Harbor is another track that seems to be fairly popular among fans of 8, and heck, it's one of the first tracks that comes to mind for me when I think about 8 as a game, even over other tracks like Mario Circuit and Rainbow Road, so I feel like it also deserves a spot. So that's the Mario Kart 8 selection, but if you've been paying close attention and counting, you'd realize that's only 23 out of 24 spots filled. Well, though I threw out a lot of the tour tracks, due to either being city themed and or present in the Booster Course Pass, there's one tour original track that doesn't fit either criteria. Yes, for the one tour representative, because I do feel like not only will Nintendo definitely at least represent it with this, but with how much of a hit it was at launch, I think it deserves to be represented. My final retro pick for Mario Kart on Switch 2 is Piranha Plant Pipeline. People were legitimately shocked this track wasn't present in the BCP, and it even seemed like there was a feeling of disappointment among some that didn't make it in. On top of that, Tour is likely not going to stay online forever, so I feel like it's better to get onto an official console Mario Kart game sooner rather than later. And those are my picks for the retro track collection for the upcoming Mario Kart game on Switch 2. Is it perfect? Obviously not. I definitely think I went overboard with representing certain themes and characters, and in reality, Tour will probably get more than one track. I also think that my predictions are too heavily based on assumptions that Nintendo probably doesn't really care about, but overall, I'm fairly happy with what I was able to whittle my list down to. But if I have my selections for retro tracks all picked out, what's stopping me from using it to craft the list of retro cups for the new Mario Kart? The answer would be my sanity, but I lost that a long time ago, so I also challenged myself to create the 6 retro cups based on these selections. Doing this brought forth another potential issues with my picks, which is, at least to me, the lack of more basic tracks to fill up the spots for the earlier retro cups, which caused some changes later on in this production, but I still think I did an okay job, all things considered. But now, let me throw the discussion down to you. I legitimately want to see your list for retro tracks in the new Mario Kart. We can make it like a sort of game, where you can have your own little bragging rights if you get more correct than me. Who knows, it may be interesting to do a follow-up video where I revisit my predictions here, and see how well I did when we do know what retro tracks are in the new game. But with that out of the way, let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comments, and I hope you have a great day.